Hello and welcome! In this video we're going to see how we can go about making some spiky hair. This video was suggested by someone in the comments, and I'm saying someone because I don't want to butcher your name. And this is a great reason why it's a great idea for you to comment if you want to see something specific. Let's get to it. So to start off, what you'll need to do is to go to funkybunny3d.com/tools.php. I'll have a link in the description, and you want to go to his Zbrush brushes and grab this Makkon hair curves, those hair brushes. You want to download them and you want to install them inside of Zbrush like you would any other brush. And these brushes were originally made by Makkon. That's why the Makkon is still in the name, Ben Hill, and they are a great set of hair brushes. And this is what you want to use mainly if you want to do spiky hair. So let's grab this generic head. Let's go to our hair brushes. We're gonna pick a thick single to start. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a stroke. And you can see here that where we started our stroke, it's thin, and where we finish our stroke, it's thick, and that's not what we want. So we're going to go under the stroke palette. We're going to dock this on the side. We are going to go under curve modifier, and we are going to change this fall off to be thick at the beginning and thin at the end, but we're not going to make it so linear, because you can see here that the tip is becoming very thin. So we're going to give it just a little bit of thickness, more thickness towards the end, because the mesh that is used to generate the curve is already pretty tapered towards the end. And we're gonna hit our curve, and now you can see that we have this thicker part where we started our stroke, and thinner part where we ended it. And that's important because we want to think about hair as growing from somewhere and going to somewhere, to keep things logical. So you don't want to start your stroke like so, and that's your hair strand. And now what you can do is you can change the size of your brush, your draw size, and if you hit on that curve, it will instantly refresh, so you can exactly find the size you want. Then you can, as long as you hover over the stroke, you can edit it. And to do so, we are going to go under curve. We are going to hit lock start and lock end, because we're making stylized hair. We're supposed to have a pretty clear idea of where we're going, where our strands are going to start, and where they're going to end. It's a little bit smaller. So now, when we edit the middle, you can see that where we finish our curve and where we start our curve will not move unless we force it to. So that way we can force the beginning of the stroke to go inside the head, so that way the hair grows from the skull and goes to somewhere like so. You can change your endpoint, and if you want to if for instance you've made this, so you want your hair to grow from here and end here, but you don't have, your curve is not long enough. Now we have inside of ZBrush 2018, we have these elastic and liquid options, so we can turn on elastic, and if we pull in the middle, you can see that we can grow some extra length of hair. And you can tweak it to be as complex as you need. So that way our beginning point and end point are still the same, but we can add more or less length in the middle, and you can shorten back to its initial position if you want to shorten it, if you made your stroke too long. And the liquid option is more or less the same thing, it's just a bit smoother. Then when you're happy with your curve and you want to make another strand, you'd simply hit somewhere else, like so, and now you can see that our curve has disappeared. And so now when we make a new curve, the previous one will be automatically masked, and we can just work on that single curve. And that is pretty much it. You can pick different types up here on top. You can pick different types of geometry for your hair. So if you need a specific style, you might just want to go over all of these. And as long as you're still editing that curve, you can always update it. So if you want to try a different kind of geometry, you simply select a different kind and hit once on the curve. If you want to change the size, simply grow your size or shrink it, hit the curve, then you can edit it, turn on liquid or not, elastic, and so on. And when you're finished, hit on the head and do another stroke. And that's pretty much it. So that's the gist of it. And now I'm going to switch to my past self and show you a demo of a haircut, a hairstyle done using this technique. And we're back in the past. So here we're starting off we're doing exactly what we did in the intro, setting up our curve to be like we need it, and then I'm going to start making the anime style haircut. You get bonus points if you find the hairstyle I'm going for. You can leave it in the comments. There's nothing to gain. When I was thinking of spiky anime hair, for some reason, it's the one that popped in my mind. So I have my reference image on the side, looking at it, and I'm trying to mimic the flow of the hair. So picking every big strand of hair, and then I'm going to lay them down one by one. Every time I make a new strand of hair, I'm going to scale down the draw size so that my new strand of hair is a bit thinner, just to match my reference. Making sure to set that beginning point inside the skull to make sure the hair grows from the head. New strand. It's pretty much straightforward for now. Just tweaking head, just remember to hit the hit somewhere in the empty space of the model to clear your curve, so you can make a new curve. Simply move all the way around the head. Now I'm picking a different style of hair strand to make the hair from the back of the skull. The hair that are just trying to fill all these empty spaces. So the video is sped up, obviously, but I think the sped up 2 times, because even though the entire thing I did it in maybe 40 minutes, it was pretty much the same thing all over again. So we have the intro, and now mostly it's just laying it down and moving the curve into position. Here I turned off symmetry for the middle strand and the back of the hair, just so that it isn't perfectly symmetrical. Those hair strands are pretty big, so sometimes it's hard to see the curve. To catch it and tweak it. Now we have this little, he doesn't always have it, but might as well put it in just to break off the symmetry. So now we're pretty much done with laying out our hair strands. So now we're going to actually sculpt them, because it's not because you're using curves to lay out your hair geometry that you're stuck, that you can't do anything to them. So now I duplicated the subtool, and so I could separate the hair from the head. So now I have a subtool just dedicated to the hair and a subtool for the head. And now we're going to use the Move topological brush to tweak the overall shape of some of these hair strands. We used the polygroup option, and we used auto grouped and then merged similar groups. Since we're using something that is symmetrical, we have a symmetrical hairstyle, so we can merge similar groups together. If you're making a hairstyle that isn't symmetrical at all, then you just need to use auto group. That way you can toggle on and off some of these strands to further refine the look of the hair. So yeah, now we laid down the shape using curves, but we have all the power of Zbrush to tweak them further. And you should never just let it be what it is. So working on individual strands, we're making sure that they are covering the skull and that they are not overlapping one another too much, because you want to have some strands over some other strands. Since it's hair a bit of overlapping isn't a big issue because hair strands tend to overlap one another. But still, you want to have it be somewhat logical because it is fairly geometric, fairly stylized hair. It's not thin strands of hair that are overlapping one another. It's big chunks of geometry. So when you have too much, when you have a bit of a colored polygroup popping, it's a good place to tweak it. We're missing a bit of a sideburn strand of hair. The smaller you make your brush size, the thinner your hair will be, but also the more sophisticated, the more detailed the curve will be as well. So the curve is made of segments, and the bigger your draw size is, the bigger the segments are. So when you make a thin hair strand, it can be pretty tedious to tweak in the exact position. So at some point I just gave up and accepted the curve and just used move topology to tweak it. Now I'm going over all of the hair strands with the H polish to clean those surfaces, those planes. So we can have some nice transitions, some nice planes. That way, we're going to see two different approaches to the same hairstyle, let's say. So we're going to have this first be very geometric, very harsh and stylized, and then we're going to layer more details on top of it. So depending on the style of hair you're going for, you could stop at different points. So if you want something that is very geometric, very stylized, then you could almost stop now. And then we're going to layer a bit more detail on top. Either way, you should always try to end, even if you're doing this very stylized approach, very geometric, very faceted approach, you should use the pinch brush, because the pinch brush will allow you to have that sharp transition where the hair grows from. Now I'm doing something, but I realize I didn't turn symmetry on. So now with the Damage Standard brush, I'm adding some extra geometry to the hair. Now we're going to use the clay buildup brush, and we're going to lay down some strokes along the growth of the hair. Just some random strokes. Well, not so random because we want them to grow in the flow in a certain way, but we're laying down a few strokes. They don't have to be perfect. Then we're going to smooth them out, and this is just to break off that very flat look. So if you were going for the flat look, then you would just maybe do the Damage Standard pass and add more little strands of hair to that grow from the skull. But here we're going over all of these strands of hair with the clay buildup brush and then smoothing it down. You could also use the rake brush to do the same effect. What you want to do is just give it some random overlapping textures, some creases and some mounts, and just break off the surface. So what we did previously was the first pass, and now we're doing a second pass of more smaller details. So if you look at the model from a distance, the first hard polish pass we did would be the first read, and then if you move closer to the character, this would be the second read, so a little bit more detail in the hair. And then we'll go over with the Diamond Standard brush to carve in some extra finer, smaller details in. We're gonna push some of those creases a bit more. But yeah, here we're nearing the end of the video. So of course this was done in 40 minutes. If you were to do this, if this was your final piece, you would spend more time, but you can always spend more time. So it's all more or less it's always going to be the same thing. You're going to layer in more and more detail. So here now with the Diamond Standard brush, we're making some cuts, and then using Alt, we're making some valleys. So that way we can have some more, instead of having that big strand of hair growing from the side of the head, now we're going to have smaller little strands of hair growing instead of just that big one. So even if you're doing the big stylized approach, this is something I would still do at the where the hair grows from the head, because that really sells those little strands of hair. That really sells the hair look. So yeah, if I were to refine this to push it further, I would work on the sideburns a bit more. So yeah, here we're using Diamond Standard. We're carving some of these valleys and making some, using Alt, making some peaks as well. This is something that really sells the hair look. You have some big strands and then some smaller details inside of them. And you can push this for as long as you need to reach the level of detail you need. And then hair also works a lot with shading. So if you give your hair enough. See, here we have some overlapping that doesn't really make sense. So if you give your hair enough peaks and valleys just to catch the light, and then you use some anisotropic shader to mimic the hair flow, the shading really affects the way people perceive hair. Now using pinch, I'm going over and making sure these the end of the hair is has a nice fall off. And then with pinch, I'm going to go over some of these bits and pieces that are flowing from inside the head, just to make sure they're pretty sharp. But yeah, overall, just layer some detail, make your big forms, layer some details in, and keep doing it until you reach the level you're happy with. And that's going to wrap this video on spiky hair. I hope you found it useful. If you have more suggestions, or if you want to see something else covered, please do leave a comment. As you can see, it helps if you want to see something covered. And that's going to wrap this up for this video, so I'll see you guys in the next one.